What's up, ladies and gentlemen? It's DH Thorne here, coming at you live with Waylon of the Black Tower. We're going to be probably getting Solomon AD in a little bit, and we got Sorsha and S-Ben Qayin with us tonight to talk about everything to do with higher dimensions, multiverses, all that kind of stuff, especially how it applies to magic. And, we'll be coming at this from our different perspectives. We've got, obviously, my perspective, Qain's, Sorsha's, and Waylon's. So what's up, everybody? How you doing tonight? And if you guys have questions, please post them in the comments, and we've got some moderators who will look at them if we don't catch them while we're talking. So, hey, what's up, everybody?
What's up, brother?
I'm talking to you guys on the screen.
We're doing good. I'm doing great. Good to be here always with the house and everybody. I know we've been sitting here for like a half an hour just busting up, laughing about things. So we're not in the most serious of moods, which is always fun. So
that's a good place to start.
Have people watching us and ready to talk about inner dimensions and all the beings that come from in between the spaces.
There's a lot of them. Yeah. I mean, well, I want to welcome you guys to the Dark Sorcery channel. Now, as you guys know, like I've got my own channel, Waylon's got his channel, but this is Dark Sorcery. Dark Sorcery is my home away from home. It's like my other house, I guess you could say. Dark Sorcery is absolutely honored to have you both on officially on our channel. And, I know Alfredo and everybody, they'd like to be here, but we try to keep the streams. We don't want like 10 people in the stream at the same time. So we kind of drew straws and, we all kind of lost. Now we all won and we're all here together. So, Waylon, what do you want to talk about here? Do you want to start us off, or should we let Sorsha or somebody else start us off? What do you want to start with?
Oh, let's let Sorsha start this because my sister right there, man.
Okay. Making sure our mics are all set up. Okay.
Yeah, I got you. I muted the right person. Go ahead.
Man, I don't know where to kick this shindig off. Interdimensions. It's a fascinating thing. I think that we all have experience in the area and interest in the area.
Like the movies, like the TV show Sliders, but with ghosts and demons and so I mean, we're gonna like cover all the bases. I think obviously most people know Qayin the best for his work, to very related with this, the angles in between. And anybody who's read my blog knows I have several articles on the concept of higher dimensions and how they might apply to magic, if at all. Waylon, I'm not sure, I know you're into the same kind of stuff as us, so.
Old ones. I am. At the very core and root of my practice is the old ones. The old ones were, the old ones are, and the old ones will be again. From beyond time, beyond angles, known and unknown, seen and unseen, felt and unfelt. They permeate the entire existence of creation itself, and they hail from the void and beyond the void. In a sense, I think that the void for them being a place of neutrality, of non-existence, if you will. I think that they created that space itself for their forms to be able to exist and to be experienced upon this plane, because you had to have that in between for them to be able to push through and to be able to work from.
Maybe let's start there. Let's start there with the idea, because there's a lot of different ways we can talk about dimensions. Let's start with the in-between concept. That's the Lovecraftian spaces, the angles in between. And Qayin, that's your baby. That's like where your bread and butter is, right? Or as close to.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much when it comes to the old ones in particular. I mean, that's when I think of the spaces in between. The only thing that really comes to mind are the old ones, and yeah, I mean, there's been crazy contact with them. It is you talk about there being a filter almost between. Well, let me explain first. The way I see things is that each universe is like a baseball, and you put it in a round trash can or something. If you filled it up, there's spaces between these baseballs. Okay, and that's how I see the spaces in between. They're in between different realities or different existences. They actually exist in between those planes. So it's rather an interesting place. A lot of people would equate that with the Citra Aura, the Vaults of Zen, things like that. the abyss in general. And so it's rather an interesting space to write about, to talk about. I mean, that's kind of my thing, the interdimensional aspect of these entities of magic. I work with the Jinn, the old ones. Again, you know, talking about the clip off and working with, you know, the Citrara and entities that exist within that realm. So it's all very interdimensional. It's kind of my cup of tea, as well as some forthcoming books that will be dealing with entities that exist again in interdimensional areas that aren't really normal for entities. I consider there being earth plane entities, and then I consider there being other entities from outside of the creation of earth, or bound to the earth. So there's a lot of different things that you know, are in play with this subject.
Right. How much does Lovecraft's work influence what you're talking about? Like, is, you know, because I know you have that current going on, the 23 current, et cetera. How much does that influence it, or is it more the other way around? Like, you saw some things in that and you ran with it from there. Like, how does that work for you?
Well, you know, he definitely had contact with these entities coming from this area, from this plane, and he suffered for it physically. But and I can go into that a little bit more. But it's I find that he is tapping into something that, or I should say that they tapped into him, as it were.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah, and they found an outlet for their voice, essentially. But they definitely originated beforehand. I don't believe that it was something that he had created. There's a lot of evidence for that within my book, The Black Book of Azathoth, as I go into detail about his contact with these entities, the process that he underwent. And it's, you know, it's very, very amazing to see, you know, just because the title of author or fictional author is applied to him, that people don't see that he's very much a medium.
Give it a chance.
And suffered the same things, you know, that the other mediums did, especially McGregor Mathers, when you're talking about the secret chiefs. Some of the members were in the Brotherhood of Light, and or I'm sorry, the Brotherhood of Luxor. And you know, it's like they actually had chiefs and consider these to be non-physical human beings or non-human entities. And I equate that very much with the old ones in regard to the fact that when in contact with these beings, McGregor or Mathers actually, you know, he suffered just great pain and said, you know, he could barely even stand it, you know, for 5 minutes to have this kind of contact with these beings, because, you know, in my opinion, you know, it's like there's not a natural connection for these beings, these completely unhuman intelligences to connect with humans, and so there is a strain upon the physical essence of the people that are being, you know, almost used or transmitted through. So it's definitely an interesting subject for sure.
Well, I've got a question for you, Kane. Okay, so I work with the old ones, and I've noticed something that it's like there's either people who are able to attune to that and be able to hold up to that current's energy, and then there are those who honestly they can't take that. Like their mind literally becomes unraveled.
Yes.
You know, what have you noticed in that? Because I know that what you're talking about goes beyond books. It goes beyond that. In your own experiences of working with them, what is your take on that? Does it take a person not necessarily creating the energetic body for it, but could it be something that could be created, or is it something that either is there or is not there?
So these particular entities, I'm sorry, can you rephrase that last bit of your question? I'm sorry.
Oh yeah. Do you believe that that there are those of us out there who just genuinely, naturally vibrate at that frequency, at that vibrational rate, or do you think that it is something that just anybody could, you know, tap into? And I don't mean like in just a short run of time, like anybody could tap into it, whether they could or couldn't, but just generally speaking, for those wanting to actually enter into the current.
Sure. No, yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. You know, there's two different types of people that I encounter with this particular branch of magic. Those who I consider or hear the call, they have a drawing. In other words, they say maybe read a Lovecraft story or transmission, as I often will call them, and just kind of feel that essence, be hooked into it. They almost feel like it's like they need more. They need to connect more. It's like they're hearing the call. They read more and more and more. They get into the magic aspects of it. They get deeper and deeper and deeper. this is both a positive and negative thing depending on what one's goal is. And so those who hear the call often are looking for this particular place, this branch of magic. Once they do this magic, as I've written, they actually feel as if they are indeed home, completely at peace. They've found everything they're looking for. And in fact, that's what the Black Book of Azathoth was written for. It wasn't written for general public. It wasn't written for, hey, try this new branch of magic, it's cool. It was written for people who were looking specifically for this craft or for this current, and to work with these entities in the most true possible way that's available. I mean, the book is written 100% to Lovecraft's authenticity. There's nothing added in by other authors, other entities, other things. This is completely pure. So to really analyze the man himself as a medium and really look at the material that came through him. So there's people that feel that, they feel home, they really tap into it, they do really well with it. There's other people that they start getting into it more and more and more, that same kind of obsession. However, they just can't handle it. And a lot of those people aren't mentally grounded to begin with, and that's a real serious problem. I've had to tell people, hey, this is not your branch of magic. Do not do this, because you're, really not mentally grounded enough to handle this. It runs reality does indeed get questioned. All of reality does. You start getting into a very interesting area with chaos magic, and a lot of people can't really handle that too much. It's there's a fine line between balancing, you're keeping one foot on reality and allowing oneself to also explore into the unknown. Often, sometimes people will take the foot off the ground and just lose themselves, and they don't really come back the same way. Most Necronomicon books that are out there come with warnings, and there's a reason for that. Mine not to be excluded. So it's dangerous field of magic, or a dangerous current of magic to get into if one isn't really prepared for it, because it isn't dealing with your normal, like I said, earth plane entities like goetic magic or whatnot.
Yeah, because like one of the titles that they referred to him as was the Sleeping Prophet, concerning his being able to dream these things.
Right.
There are lots of times when right there on the verge of sleep, I've seen all kinds of crazy things be pulled into dimensions. Just see like star-shaped creatures that's mouth is open, which in my opinion gave rise to where the aura star itself came into being, the curved one, the curved star. H.P. Lovecraft's, not the regular 5-point star.
From Derleth, actually. Yeah. But yes.
And anyway, through these dreamings and stuff, I've seen ruins. I've seen really, really, really strange things.
Right.
And sometimes even had my form devoured and changed to fit in that place. And it's very scary when you're in a place like that, because your first thought is get out of there when you see something about to eat you. But when you go along with the process, it's amazing how much deeper into the current you get. You just got to trust it. But you do have to have a sense of knowing about you and your own workings with Nyarlathotep. And man, dude, just seeing you, in those old videos out in the desert in the middle of the day.
That was so powerful.
Feel that.
Yeah. That was amazing. I was out with the EA wedding. We were doing the video course for the Black Book of Azathoth, and it was a straight week. We were pulling 12-hour days and just constantly working in this current, and it was really got to be really intense, especially working after doing the evocations with like the Haunter of the Dark. That comes to mind immediately. Man, there was definitely something with me that night. Very intense path working in its own right, just to go through this this week essentially of just straight 12-hour days over and over and over. This current was really hardcore. Really ready to back out of it at that point, not for good, but it was like I needed to just kind of like reset myself, reground myself after going into the void, if you will, or into the vaults of Zen. so for so long, it was really an intense experience to do. And working with Nyarlathotep, that's always really something very special, very powerful. So yeah, it was
definitely for me. Like, I mean, obviously my story goes along the lines of I was skeptical about everything again. I had lost my way. And after seeing those videos and some other things with quitting, I was like, I got to do this again. And yours, that book was the one I targeted on, and I felt that strong call. And I had done, well, I'm not gonna detail everything I've done, but I did the initiation in particular, and it's on my blog. And the first night was one of, like, wow, this is after, it's real after all again. This is amazing. Then the next night I had a very, profound vision, which felt strong to me. And then the third night of the initiation, it felt like a dud. I felt like nothing happened. And I was like, I must have done it wrong, or maybe I was just too scared going into this. Maybe it was just doing it and then on the way home, I entered into what I consider rapture, like I get with other spirits, because I don't work just with goetic entities. I work with a lot of other things, but I'm more public about the goetic stuff. And when I was on my way home, I just felt like I had to go to the water. I had to go to the ocean. And on the way to the beach, I entered this state of rapture, but it wasn't like rapture like I've gotten with other beings, where it's got like a cathartic feeling, a peaceful feeling. It felt like a kind of madness that was a peaceful madness, if that makes sense. And I remember I took a picture of my eyes when I got where I was going, and it was like I was just mauled spiritually. I was spiritually mauled. That's the only way I can put it. And I was ravaged with this understanding. And when I got home, like I was a different person, like completely different again. It cleared all of the blockage that had kept me from doing magic for so long. But I would agree with you. It's not for everybody. I loved it. And I find that I got to do it in doses. There's times where I feel like I want to work with nothing else but Nyarlathotep. I got to work with him. I just have to. Like, I just want to. Even I just talk to him, but he's definitely, like you said, he's in your book. In fact, my fondest memory, not just of the magic, was of when I first got the first sample of your book, because I think there's a little free chapter, or whatever. I was reading that, and I was reading that, and we were waiting to pick up my son at a concert at Jones Beach, and we were waiting there in the parking lot for like 2 hours because we figured we'd kind of like just chill out because it's a bit of a drive. And I'm reading this, and it's a hot summer night, and I'm hearing the bugs outside and everything. And I just felt the current wash over me as I'm reading your explanation about where these spirits, the origin could be, the different evidence for them.
Right.
And because I'm a bit of a science nerd, like you started to touch on like some of that stuff. And that's when I was like, I got to do this. I have to do this. And that is one of the more powerful experiences I've had in a long time. So, it's amazing to bring it up in a conversation about dimensions, because that's what it's about.
Absolutely. Sort of making that contact and accessing that gnosis that comes through. But yeah, definitely a tricky situation at times.
I got drawn into a desert of pyramids that seem to be floating, and I don't know how to explain this. When working with Kane's version of his Nyarlathotep calling and the thunder, that's funny shit. Any rate,
that's pretty wild.
That is.
Were the pyramids black?
Yes, they were.
I got black pyramids. I experienced black pyramids. Sorry to interrupt. I got the black pyramid on my second night. I saw something like that. It was wild. That's it. Yeah, I didn't know that. Thank you for bringing that up. We got to talk about that.
Black basalt. They don't look like they're made of onyx or obsidian, but black basalt, and because they got that rough texture look to them. And there's this tall being. I want to say it's about 7 foot tall. Is the way Nyarlathotep appears. Just a tall man.
Right.
No weapons, no staff, nothing like that. Just standing there, just robed. And it was really strange because the sky isn't like, you think of the desert, bright sun blaring down. There was a different kind of light in this place, and I've always equated this to a violet light, as if to protect, to allow their essence to remain in whatever form they're taking in these planes, especially when they're trying to interact. And he was guiding me through the sands, and we were going to a buried city out there.
The nameless city.
Yeah, and I gotta say,
yep.
He wanted to go over there and grab my book because on it, on the back of the black book of Azathoth, you've got the scarab on it. Over the doorway of this underground city's Neferkal's thing, and I was sitting there going, holy shit, you know, and I know that in my own, exactly, brother, exactly. and I remember when I did this and I was being led there and I saw this, I was like, well, I never put two and two together when I was reading the book. And after going down into, I want to think of it as a ceremonial chamber. Well, I mean, there's a hallway and everything, don't mind you. And, you know, there's like, I don't know how to explain it, but it's like a side room that's built into it. And then it breaks out into the chamber. And in the inner chamber, you know, there was this huge sarcophagus. Kind of reminds you of the one that they said that they found, that big black one that, you know, they had no idea. It reminded me, because it was the same size and everything. I remember that the feeling there was that this was a place where you gave the offerings of the living to feed the dead, and to use that energy as a means of transferring your essence into a higher state of being.
Yeah, I remember on. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, King.
I know it's all right.
Oh, I'd love to hear it.
I want to bring up one thing real quick. I just want to bring up one thing real quick. It's a technical issue. I don't know. I'm getting like all kinds of internet lag tonight. So I apologize if the people that are watching the stream are getting low quality or something. It's not going through my computer. So whatever stream you guys are getting is going through YouTube. So it's got to be on their end. It actually looks okay on the YouTube stream. So I'm just going to assume it looks okay for you guys. But I'm getting a really laggy stream. So if I seem like a little weird or something, I'm trying to follow along. During the second night that I did it, that was one of the most interesting nights too, because I had a moment of, I was sitting, you know, in the circle with the triangle, and I was staring off into space, and I was zoning out. I was getting my senses back, my senses of the spiritual world again. And I'm looking into the distance, and I see a pyramid appearing in my vision. And it's very unusual for me. I don't have a lot of visual experiences in spirituality because of, it's not really a condition, but I have trouble visualizing because of, it's almost like, what do they call it? Aphantasia or something like that, but it's not quite the same thing. So I'm sitting there and I'm getting this vision. I see the slant of the pyramid. It's very large and it's looming. And then next thing I know, I envision myself almost like, as someone from a different time, like an Egyptian period or before, really. It didn't feel like Egyptian at all. Right. And I'm standing there with some kind of an animal, and I feel like I'm waiting for someone. I've got like a bonfire, and I know it's a ritual fire. And then this spirit robed in blackness comes up and reaches out towards me. And I wrote about it. I don't remember the exact things, but then I snapped out of it, and I was like, wow, that was intense. I don't usually get that. And at least not in a long time. And that woke me back up. That was one of the wake ups. It was pretty crazy. Like when Waylon's talking about like the Black Pyramid, that was like, or you did, I forget who, it just like hit me like that. Like, oh, I forgot that part. That was really crazy.
Yeah, it's really interesting. A lot of people that kind of delve into that realm of things report Black Pyramids or realm of the Black Pyramids, something that's been brought up recently. So yeah, it's just interesting that everybody else is also having these same experiences. Very much validates it, you know, as a reality somewhere else, that people are actually going. It's not a dream; it's a place, and we're all visiting it at a certain period.
Yeah.
So it
definitely felt astral. It definitely did. It was a very much, you know, like it was definitely like I went somewhere. Absolutely. Like it wasn't just that I went there. It came here because I saw it overlaid in my environment. Like I saw, because the school I was doing in a school field, I was being sneaky. I saw it overlaid, and then I went into it, and it was very much like an astral journey. It was very impressive. He's a very powerful spirit. I mean, I did a working with him for something a while ago. And it was one of the ones that I made public because it's got interesting manifestations during it, and everything I asked for has come true with flying colors. People have remarked about it, people who were in on it. It was the Sam Hainwright that I did. And he's a very, very, you know, enigmatic entity, but at the same time, he doesn't hide things from you. You know, would you agree? Like he doesn't hide things, but it's enigmatic. It's never just like, here's the answer. It's like, here's visions, here's gnosis, here's,
it's again, you know, he's the filter for the old ones. You know, as he says, as it said, the soul of the old ones, the messenger, and that's kind of interesting. He speaks for all of them, has all of their essence within him. I see him as the actual filter, able to communicate with mankind in the form of a man. and that way, when one interfaces with him, he's able to work with the old ones, almost as an ambassador, if you will. So if people go and start working with the old ones, generally without working with Nyarlathotep, they actually have a lot of problems. Generally, the chaos is too much, the force is too much, and you need that kind of filter to work.
Right.
Work, as it said, to get to God, one must go through Jesus. And in the same way, to get to the old ones, one must go through Nyarlathotep. And so
that's almost terrifying. That's such a terrifying thought. I love it.
But
Now you have a right on your, on the house website.
Yeah, it's ours
for
now.
an initiation with him. Yeah. So, I would, does that, not to give the show away, but how related to that, is that to your book? How is it in the same similar vein?
Yeah,
do you get the same effect, but just in one shot?
Well, the idea of this is for those who, again, don't just hear or don't just want to try a new form of magic or curious. So this is for those who are really truly devoted, who feel home. Again, as I've said, working with this current, there's no question anymore. This is essentially, at the end of the day, their magical system to end all magical systems that they work with, their core, if you will. And so for those kinds of people that really want to commit even more so, working with this pact of Nyarlathotep really ushers them into this current, opens up more doors for them to work with the old ones. Banishings and things like that are left at the door. You're completely in now at this point, and really ready to access the old ones and start working your path, working with them. So that's the idea of that, is just making that really strong connection and bond for him to essentially be a spirit guide for you to walk you through these different processes that you'll be going through. So yeah, it's a very powerful rite. Nyarlathotep has been equated with many different beings. So it's different. It's interesting because as I've written in the introduction, there's a lot of different entities that kind of equate to him, and so he's definitely a figurehead. In his own right, and that's how I see him anyway. And as I've written, it's like these old ones, they've been kind of interwoven throughout history here and there, and in my opinion, they even are a lot of the precursors to a lot of the newer religions, or a lot of the things that sprang up. And you can find hints of them here and there throughout different religions, if you know where to look. And I've written all that in the book, so it's I try to draw all the different connections, like you said, looking at the lore of it, looking at different religions and finding the essence of them there, looking at science, finding them within that as well. And they exist within both realms equally, so right. As I've written, though, it's like when you try to find them, it's like seeing a spirit on the edge of your vision. As soon as you look at it, it's gone. So you only get just a gossamer of information, or they hide very well. So it was difficult to track down a lot of this stuff, but I'm glad and fortunate that I had access to some very rare manuscripts. So yeah, it made things a little better. But yeah, they're difficult to work with and to kind of track down in history.
I tell you,
it seems like there's none. I don't like to talk about power levels, because that's not really how this works. But it seems like the old ones, specifically those ones that you're working with and that I'm working, in this book and all these practices, one of the things that's unique about them is because they're from the spaces in between, because they're from this outside plane and this other whatever origin, they don't seem to be like, they don't operate by the same restrictions as other spirits, except, as you've noted in the books and stuff, there's a lot of astral or stellar alignments that go on,
sure.
Or at least with the moon. But it seems like you can't really keep them at bay very easily. You can't, if they want to deal with you or against you, they're just going to, and they don't. I spoke. One of the things that's interesting was I had actually worked with my Azazel 30-day working with him, and I brought up Nyarlathotep. I asked him, "Is this entity real? What is this?" And he says, no, this has been lurking around for a very long time. Right. He said they don't even know they just know he's in it for the longest game possible. You couldn't imagine whatever's going on. Like we're so insignificant. What's that?
The Alpha and the Omega. He's there in the beginning and the end.
Yeah. It's like he's playing like when we're talking about like the end of the universe in trillions of years, whatever he's working towards is out there somewhere. Yes. It's not even here. It's so long term. And he said, I'm like, can I trust this being? He's like, we don't know if we trust this being, but we see no harm in working with him, if that makes any sense.
Right.
So it's kind of like, it's so, it's kind of like, just like in Lovecraft, there's such a big entity that we're like an ant on the heel of an elephant, but the elephant's the size of the universe.
Right.
We're so, but yet at the same time, Nyarlathotep will focus on you for just an instant, and you'll get wham, you'll get knocked by this power. It's really intense, And Waylon, I'm sorry for cutting you off, brother. You
early work, with Iwas and believed also, that there's a definitely strong connection in that regard. There, the way he described him and his encounters. So I mean, there's a lot of correspondences between people's encounters with him and what they've experienced. So yeah, definitely some bigger magicians have even had these kinds of experiences. So
one thing that
go ahead, Waylon. What were you going to say?
One thing that I always thought was very, very strange is what Qayin's talking about with Nyarlathotep being their voice. He's the emissary. He's the one that's right there with it. The very first one to ever reach out to me was Yogg-Sothoth. And this is very strange because it wasn't like an entity. It wasn't like a being. It was like something that when I went to sleep, I could feel it wrap around me, and all of a sudden I was in another place. And this kept going on and on and on. And I was at first I didn't realize what it was or what it was about. And then I started looking, because at the time I was thinking, Azathoth, Nyarlathotep, Yogg-Sothoth, and I was trying to figure out how the angles worked with this particular style of beings. And I spent years using that same energy, that same presence, that same essence to fuel and work my own magics, my own things I was doing, astral projection, etheric manipulation, anything of this sort. Anything that goes that steps in an angle, that steps in between, and like really, really strange, like you wouldn't even believe that that's an angle.
Right.
And I became like this huge Yogg-Sothoth fan, and I wrote down everything I could think of, like even my own key. Man, that is a door opener and a half. It's not only just a key; it is the door itself. This door and key is one.
Well, that's exactly what I thought. Use the key and the gate.
Yeah, and then when I went was reading the Black Book of Azathoth, and I'm sitting there and I here in my living room. It was the middle of the day. I'll never forget it. It was probably about noon, and working some of the left-hand path workings I did, like with Armin and stuff. You do your prayers and supplications at noonday. When the sun's at its height, which is somewhere around 2 or so, and but about 1 or 2, something like that. But anyway, so I decided, I'm going to do the calling of Nyarlathotep from the book. I go and I do this calling, and all of a sudden, what I thought would be here, I was pulled somewhere else. I was literally on the top of this pyramid, and this pyramid was the top of this gigantic freaking staff, and there were these like Naga beings that there was 3 of them, and they were just facing me. And they were vibrating some kind of really strange sound that I can't explain. And this sound just kept building and building and building until it was like tearing me down into like a sludge, only to be absorbed into this pyramid. And in the center of it, I found that the secret of what they called the solid of their realm was represented as this pyramid, as this 3-sided pyramid, not 4-sided, but 3-sided pyramid. And in it, I was given a form. And was left standing before Nyarlathotep, who was laughing. And that's all he would do is laugh.
Mm.
And I let it go. I didn't think anything else about it. And I got to say, after that moment, there comes a time when it's like being initiated into a current without, knowing it's an initiation or going in that direction.
Right.
Wow.
Do any of y'all have like self-initiations that occurred without your direct consciousness getting into it?
It's almost like when I talk about things, in my book and my work, is that, a lot of this stuff, you are self-initiated and everything, even if you're working with other spirits, in my opinion, because you're the one who's making the first step. Even if you believe that you're not the universe, if you don't believe in a non-dualistic universe, you're still the one who's making the first step. And you're still initiating yourself, I guess. But, yeah, I'm not sure. Actually, Sorsha has been very quiet, and I think, she's just sitting, listening, and being cute there. What do you think of all this goofiness that we're talking about? Hold on, let me get your mics working there, right? There we go.
I'm just taking it all in. I think there's so many different ways to consider. I'm hearing some feedback. There we go.
There we go. I think
Okay.
you're muted, right? We'll try. We're gonna work it out. That's a sound issue we got to figure out. But it sounds like it's okay. Keep talking.
Okay, so I heard two questions. So what was Waylon's question first? Was that to all of us or to Kane?
No, to all of you.
And I couldn't hear the question because my microphone
sorry.
and things were lowered.
Have you ever had experiences like that where you were self-initiated without you consciously directing the initiation?
Yes, I think that, when we consider these things, I mean, we have the entities that are in these dimensions, that are in these currents, and then it's like the current itself has a specific frequency, if you will. And I don't know, I think that for me, I enjoy working with different entities, but I even more enjoy working with the essence, the feel of the current itself. It just has a feel, it has a power, it has an essence.
Hmm.
And I think that the entities are different personifications within a given current.
I mean, that's what I like about that is that, like, for me and my work with them is with all spirits is that they appear to us with the material we have in our psyche, in our awareness. And so when we're working with like, especially like really far out entities like the Lovecraftian ones, that's kind of why I think, Lovecraft, everyone kind of criticizes him for not being specific about what they look like, but these beings are from an outside angle, an outside place. And so there's nothing for our minds to wrap around to describe them except tentacles and blobs and weirdness. And so when you're saying like that these vibrations, that's what you're keying in on, it gives you that's what I think of like almost right away. Yeah.
I was talking about that in that sense, with that particular initiation, because each one has something different that they were doing. This was all in accordance when I was walking the seven gates of the elder gods. As soon as I would go to sleep, after each gate, I was immediately approached by a particular one of the old ones, and was initiated strangely through dreams like that. After about a year of working working through the system of the Simon Necronomicon, in the way that I have it broke down, because that book by itself it's all over the place. But anyway, that's not the But the thing is that, so I've been working on this for 24 years, and I put this together, and I'm following like a program, and I actually physically do it the way the book says. Well, I had to reorder the book, to where it could actually be workable like that. And I'm not talking about just the 7 steps. There's more to it than that. But I noticed that the more I kept working with them, there were more times when I would dream and visit places. I'd come and go even consciously awake. I'd be like, what in the world? Be like my consciousness was projected to another realm. I have this particular place outside of, I guess it would be in their realm or dimension or whatever. And that's where I go, and I would let my soul rest. And it was beside this big, huge thing that if it ever fucking woke up, I'm no fool in thinking that this thing ain't going to think of me as anything but a freaking, you know, appetizer for whatever else. That's not generally there, but also within this exact same realm, and it's why I kept going there. I was shown these beings. The first time I ever saw one, I always saw it was from the back, and it was moving pretty fast, like a shadow being kind of. But it was solid black, and it was amorphous form, like a human being. So you know, it looked familiar. I followed this thing, and immediately it like stepped sideways, completely disappeared, and wound up right in front of my face. And the first thing I noticed, and I started referring to these because there are a few of them. I don't know how many. I refer to them as the faceless ones. These are sorcerers, magicians, people who have walked this path. This is what they've become through walking this current. Is their identity is stripped from them, and a lot of times we like to think of that as, oh, that's negative or whatever, but it's not. They have learned how to, through the void, how to exist beyond, you know, the need for such things of that nature, and they all communicate mentally. I know this may make me sound a little crazy, and that's cool. I'll wear the plastic pants. I'm good. I'll take my crayons too and my helmet. But the thing is, though, is that I've also talked to a few truly dedicated practitioners who have met these, and when I was referring to them as the faceless ones, they're like, "What?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And I was explaining it to them, and they're like, "Holy shit, I've seen those. I didn't know that's what they were called." I was like, "I didn't know that's what they're called. That's what I called them because it's the only way you can describe them." But you will notice that there is power emanating from these beings. Not at first, you know, because it's like one of those things where it's somebody that has transformed beyond the flesh. You know, it takes me back to the sands and going down into that place down below the sands, and it's got that same feel like that's where they were born.
Yeah, I would add like these entities don't feel like egregoric at all. Like it like a lot of them sometimes do, and I've made the argument that maybe they are because Lovecraft willed them into existence and blah 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 blah, but they don't feel that way, if that makes sense. Like usually egregoric spirits have a feel to them, their
Sure.
attitude, you know, and they don't feel that way. They're too enigmatic. They're too like
Too complex.
you know, what's that?
Too complex.
Yeah, too and enigmatic. Like go ahead and try to figure them out. You won't, because it's weird. And you know, I want to get onto like a little bit of the scientific angle if we could, because there's so much, you know, that is said about things. You know, the topic here is dimensions too. We're talking about Lovecraft, which is like that's a core of it. And you know, dimensions. I have 2 blog posts on the subject, which, you know, I don't really update my blog anymore because I'm so busy with this other stuff, but you know, there's some old books. There's Planiverse and Flatland, and I highly recommend, if people haven't read them, to pick them up. And you know, you can get some. I think you can get Flatland for free. You can actually find videos on YouTube of it, and it's talking about a 2-dimensional universe as an allegory to perhaps a 3-dimensional universe, and it takes the idea of beings living in a flat 2-dimensional universe and comparing them to how we would be, you know, in our 3-dimensional universe to a 4th-dimensional universe. Actually, I don't think they bring that up, but the implication is there because they show the limitations that the 2-dimensional beings have. And they show how a 3rd-dimensional entity would have such godlike power over these 2-dimensional entities, because you have to kind of visualize, like imagine it's a thin sheet of paper, you know, like this. And imagine your entire world, your entire universe was as thick as this sheet of paper. And far as you were concerned, you'd only see like lines. That's all you'd see. But to a 3rd-dimensional entity like myself, all I have to do is this, and now I can see inside you. So if you were like a circle, you know, if you were a circle here and there was another circle here and you were both alive, you'd both look like just kind of lines to one another. But to me, you look like a circle, and I would be able to see inside you. I'd be able to teleport you around. I'd be able to flip you backwards in your own reality so that your left hand would become your right hand, and you wouldn't be able to figure it out. And then if you extrapolate that to our experience, and here we are as 3rd-dimensional beings. Now imagine that there's a fourth dimensional reality, for example. And I don't mean, a lot of people confuse time as the fourth dimension. You know, we live in a space-time continuum. Space and time are the same, essentially, as far as Einstein's concerned. So it's really it's three spatial dimensions plus time. And if we had a fourth spatial dimension, so you have you have up and down, you have left and right, and you have forward and back. What if there was another dimension that was something else that you can't visualize? And what if, in the same sense as, you know, there's little two-dimensional beings on this sheet of paper, what if we are those three-dimensional entities, and there's a fourth dimensional reality that is much, much, much more unknowable to us because our minds can't even wrap around it? And these, you know, every spirit, perhaps, maybe not just the Lovecraftian ones, every spirit could be said to occupy, including ourselves, perhaps. You know, maybe we're the very tip of a hyperdimensional object that isn't aware of itself because its senses are in the third dimension, but its full reality is in multiple dimensions. Now, there is one caveat, which is recently when they detected two black holes merging last year, the LIGO detection, one of the things that they predicted was that if there's higher dimensions, if there's more than three spatial dimensions, then they would be able to prove whether or not they existed or not, because the gravity waves would be affected by this extra dimension. So in other words, if you shine a light, there's a thing called the inverse square law. And as the light radiates out, it spreads out to cover the same essential space because of the way angles work. It spreads out to cover the same surface area, essentially, of that 360 degree, clock face. And so as it goes further out, it spreads out and gets weaker, and it's a square. So in other words, every whatever foot it goes out, it gets a square, inverse square proportion less powerful. And they figured that if there is a higher dimension, they believed that this would mean that gravity would be similarly affected to the point where it would be more than an inverse square law. So in other words, if gravity was leaking out into a fourth dimension, it should be weaker because of it. Right. Well, they found that it didn't do that. And this, in the mainstream media of science, they, of course, immediately jumped on this saying that means there's no higher dimensions. But the people who produced the paper itself said that all that proves is that gravity may not function in that dimension. However, he did add that if gravity doesn't, if light doesn't, if none of the known forces do, then we don't know for sure whether it even matters. In other words, there could be a higher dimension, but if there's no interaction. And I have two responses to that statement. One is, well, we don't know if there's no interaction because there's still a lot of weird things. You have spooky action at a distance, which could be the exact representation of quantum entanglement. That's exactly what it is. And you could have, when you have two particles seemingly a distance apart, but they interact at the same time as if they're connected. Well, that connection could be through this other direction that we can't imagine.
I mean, yeah, that's the thing that Einstein couldn't figure out. How could it possibly move faster than light when it was? Right. And it's because it's not moving; it's still connected, and it's connected through a higher dimension. So I would say that you were definitely dead on with that.
And then you have. Go ahead, Waylon.
So there's a thought that it comes to mind concerning space and time. Space, time, and I'd like to add a third, thought. And, because thought would then be that light that you're talking about, that projection, if you will. The only way that you can, that you could consciously, like on a personal level, be able to comprehend how that actually works in that degree. Because imagine it like this right here. You can sit here and you have Wushin, which is no mind. It's where you clear the mind. It's absolute clear thought. There's emotions, are dulled, senseless. It's this void. And then in that particular state of being comes true awareness, comes true consciousness. This is what I'm referring to as thought, because this is the essence of self at its most purest, rawest form. And maybe that is the aspect that actually creates it. Because as I've always said, that time and space is an illusion. Time is an illusion. Space is an illusion. It's an optical illusion. It's, and I'm not trying to go into the flat Earth and all that other stuff. But it's based on where these people keep coming up with all this, out there stuff, is because you do have to look at it from a certain point of view, but you cannot hold to it and say that is infallibly, absolutely you can't call it a law according to science. Because it's not that tied down. You can't do that.
Yeah.
Then
I don't know. I mean, the thing is with quantum physics, there's no equation that exists without consciousness. And so essentially none of it can exist without you, without your consciousness involved. It cannot be extracted. It cannot be deleted. It cannot be taken away from those equations. So, at the core of all of it is consciousness. And so, I mean, I would equate that with thought, if you will, or at least knowing one exists. In whatever form.
Consciousness has a couple different definitions, but I agree. Like, consciousness is like the interaction of entities, and it's doesn't have to be self-aware. Like, a lot of people make the mistake of thinking consciousness has to be self-aware. Rock is conscious. You just have to understand that its consciousness is a different vibration than yours. It's a different, it's a different understanding. And I would like to paint an interesting scenario for you guys. Now, I've done a couple of, I've had, like, I was actually writing a book, a fantasy book last year that I gave up on for a while because this all happened to me, and I kind of put it down. And I realized that I might have actually been astral traveling to another place, and this is where it was coming from. But I want to paint for you guys an interesting metaphor, perhaps, a different perspective. What if, because this was sort of a dream I had once, and I think I mentioned it to Waylon once, which was, imagine for a moment that we are all, existing on the surface of a black ocean or whatever. This is just a metaphor, so just play with it. We're existing on the surface of like this big black ocean, and we're all kind of swimming and treading water, and we're interacting with each other. And we're, I'm talking to Qayin, and there's Qayin, and I'm talking to Waylon, and there's Waylon. And in this dream, I was pulled down under the surface for a moment, and I looked down at my feet, expecting to see feet, but the feet descended on into the darkness and became like tentacles going further and further down, just like one big tentacle going all the way down. And as I followed it with my mind's eye in my dream, I noticed that everyone else was connected to a tentacle as well. And as I went further and further down, all these tentacles joined in this epic darkness that was one thing. And I thought to myself, well, now, what if we are all kind of like the sensory apparatus of a higher dimensional entity, entering into a third dimensional or whatever, third dimensional plus time universe to experience it, kind of like as if I stuck my finger through a two-dimensional universe to interact with it, to have fun, to have make it a game. What if that's, and that's Azathoth. If you want to play around with the Lovecraftian imagery, that's kind of the essential, that's Azathoth. I always thought of Azathoth as, each one of his eyes is one of us. It's an element of reality that is experiencing, and he's the blind idiot God. He doesn't know that he's dreaming this infinite number of dreams, and if he wakes up, the game ends. It's almost all too perfect, which probably means it's wrong, but
Go ahead, Kane. I'm sorry.
I'm just saying, it does remind me of kind of conversations I've had with Christians of, things that kind of disturbs them. If, say, we are an extension of this higher God they believe in, and that we are its consciousness. We essentially, God's a schizophrenic. We are God. I'm talking to God. I'm talking to God. I'm talking to God. We are all talking to each other, learning from each other. The way to do this quickly is almost like a quantum computer, if you will. Rather than have one life to live through and learn every time, he's doing it through all of us at once, taking all this information and storing it. And of course, when we die, all that information is again downloaded into the mainframe. And so, the motherboard or the master computer, and all that experience processed and taken in, and you essentially no longer exist because we are of this entity. And that's really, really rather disturbing. And, but it is interesting because it does kind of lead into, the clip off, or what happened with Satan leaving, and that kind of goes into the mind of God. And what true, I was talking about this earlier, what was evil is different. It has different connotations today than it did then, but back then what was considered evil was separation from God, so leaving that mainframe, leaving that, standing up on one's own, existing on one's own without this controlling force that is going to devour you at the end of your life, essentially. So it kind of all plays into each other. It's just kind of interesting.
So Thorne, he was talking about the many eyes of Azathoth. An experience I had wow, years ago, and it scared the crap out of me. And I don't say that lightly. I'm not talking about, it was a scary thought. That's not what I'm talking about. Anybody who's astrally projected and actually knows when there's a piece of them that has left and is in a place. I had entered into a realm. I was shooting past the stars, and I was trying to go as far as I could. And I was trying to blanket my mind so that my mind would try to project what should or shouldn't be in place. And I found myself in a rather strange place. And at first, I didn't know what I was looking at. It just looked like a big, huge wall. And all of a sudden, there's this glow. I kind of zoom back, kind of pan back, try to, push the image far away from me so I can take a better look at it. And there is this huge thing on what you can refer to as the border of our universe, and literally looking like an open maw that would devour anything and everything. And it was huge. And here's what was scary. As soon as I realized what I was looking at, as soon as I consciously realized what I was looking at, it became aware of me. And it's one of those things where, you think, oh, well, it's big and I'm smaller, I can get away faster, blah, blah, blah. Well, in certain situations, there's things like that when you'll come to an awareness that there's no such thing. It doesn't play by the same rules. And the very first thing I did, I'd read a book years and years ago, and I'm very glad I did read it. I made somewhere around, I'll use the words billions or trillions, but understand what I'm saying. There were a lot of forms of myself. Because when you're talking about omnipotent beings like that are able to be at any place at any time, just like that, not even that, I mean, faster than that, I created as many versions of myself as I could possibly imagine. I thought of a beach with like sand, and I was thinking of every grain of sand. And I was able to escape out of this area, and not without the feeling like it still knew it still knew me. And that's when I became aware of some of the myths about how the stars keep them out. And I gotta say, it's some really, really weird shit. The more you play with this stuff, and for those people who are like, oh yeah, I would go do this, and I would go and I would do that, and I'd work with them, and I'd work with them. There are some of these things that you're not going to get anything out of. There's no friendship, there's no camaraderie. It's nothing like that because they don't think like we think. There's no consciousness in our idea of consciousness, but they're not animalistic either. They're so it's not something you can come to understand like, oh, that's a wolf. It has sharp teeth, claws, and if it's hungry, it's going to attack, or if it's trying to protect its territory, it's going to attack.
Yeah, like I would say, like other spirits are focused on our growth and our like our ascension. The old one, whatever, the Lovecraftian spirits, it's a different ball game. It's not, I mean, they want to help you when they can, but it's with a different mentality, I think, personally, at least when my experience was. When we talk with like a goetic spirit, you usually get the impression that if you work with it right, it wants to elevate you. Nyarlathotep was willing to help me, but it was different. It was a different sensation. It was not about making me into a god form or something. It was more like, I can't explain it. I can't explain it. It was, here's what is. And it was almost like, we're talking about a being of such chaos, like, there's chaos in terms of mathematics, that I'm just a piece of the pattern. I'm just a fractal in the pattern. And he's just flicking me a little bit so that I go in a direction that he wants things to go. It's a completely different experience.
No, that's exactly what trying to explain is it's not the same, not the same at all in that regard. Like you were bringing up earlier, banishings don't really work. They're completely outside of a lot of different realms of things that we're working on. You described, hey, you work with goetic spirits. Usually you work with the spirit, you call the spirit, you make a deal, you work things out, the spirit helps you out. Again, coming back to the whole, call of the situation is that, when people people start working with these entities, it's not to get this or to get that. It's simply to commune with these beings.
Yeah.
And from that communion, yes, things will happen in your way, but it's not the goal. It's not the end all be all. It's not the focus of it all. It's really just for that magician to go into that current and fully immerse themselves and strengthen themselves within it. And yes, things happen in a way, but it's not on a different level than cause and effect or want and need and having that fulfilled. So yeah, there's definitely a different parameter when working with these beings.
Now, Waylon, I want to ask you a question in a second. I'm going to ask this to everybody because I think obviously we kind of know like how Qayin feels about this because of his book works and everything else. But, especially like even like when you read Book of Smokeless Fire and he's talking about the different, geometric things that he's got going on. That's all it's got a Lovecraftian slant to it as well because of the angles and all of this stuff that's going on,
Yes.
the way that works geometrically. So let me ask each one of you one at a time. I'm actually going to start with Waylon, then we'll go to Sorsha, and then we'll end up on Qayin because I don't even think I'm going to have an answer to this because I don't even think of it this way. I feel like when I work with spirits, I'm just doing it. But how do you think this interdimensionality, this idea of hyperdimensional space, influences if it does at all, Waylon? How would you, if you were to just sit down and try to think of a way to apply this whimsical knowledge to your magical practice, how would you incorporate it, if at all? Like, what would you think about?
Exactly how I do it now, brother. That sounds silly and sarcastic, but it's not. Okay, so think of it this way: we are not any one form. We are not. We're not any one face. We're not any one facet of the diamond. When you embrace all aspects, and this is very hard to explain to people because a lot of people they think they know what you're talking about, and some do. But take into account, for example, shamanism. Shamanism teaches you how to collect your soul parts, put them back together. Well, in a sense, what we do in this current, we're not just travelers, because coming from anybody who's been there before, we know we've been there before. The paths and the ways that we know, it didn't come up as a surprise. It is something that each of us, we've already been there. We've already done that. We're just remembering. I don't know how else to explain that. As far as how to put it into your practice and things like that, it begins with a thought. You have to eliminate from your consciousness the concept that you're finite. This is where Qayin, where I agree completely with Qayin, and I've reading some of his works where he talks about there is a chance for the psyche to crack, for it to break, psychosis of all kinds, madness, even as in the terms of the mad Arab, stuff like this. These things are real because when you're trying to expand your mind, you're breaking the casing. The container no longer, if you haven't been working slowly at it, one piece at a time, accepting different realities, the mind is not ready for that. So you take a new person up that just comes up, oh, I'm into magic now. And you're like, oh, I want to follow the current, I want to do this. Well, this may not be the brightest idea. And the reason why, not to begin with, is because right off the bat, what happens is their mind is not prepared for that. Right. And so that's what we're doing is we're exploring these different facets and we're accepting them as a reality. And that way, when we tap into it, we become stronger. Yes, I've had my own sanity challenged. Come to find out, it wasn't because of something I hadn't worked through. It was because there was an angle that I had not taken into consideration before attempting to work with certain powers. Like that one with that thing beyond the stars, like I was talking about. I'm telling you, I was not prepared for that. And I'm not talking about seeing it, because seeing it, yeah, it can be all this, that, and the other. But when you truly feel the essence of this being permeate through you and like latching on to you, first off that it's got your scent. It knows you. Now it is well aware of you. It has consciously been like, oh, that's Waylon, you know. And a lot of times when we think that we're touching out, we're reaching out, we're touching things, we're getting to know them, their energy, they're reaching out, touching us. It's quite the opposite. And so the dichotomy of understanding, for lack of better words, is like an Alice in Wonderland. What is up is down, what is down is up, you know. But the more that you come to accept different realities and different states of being without judgment, without biasness, just you don't have to buy into it, but they're called paradigms for a reason. You know, they are the constructive way of working through magical systems without cracking or breaking. And that is how I equate it to my workings. And that's how I would suggest anybody that's going to work it. This is how I would suggest that they integrate it into their own workings safely, correctly, is adopt it as a paradigm and work on visualizing every aspect of magic as being just a faucet of a diamond.
I love that. And yeah, because especially like what I love about it is you address that whole, we're all a little different. Even though, like I'm a confirmed non-dualist, I'm a dialectic monist, so I have my own, but that fits in it, and it's kosher in the sense that it validates what everybody experiences in magic. Everybody does sometimes get this, this feeling of being a facet of the same jewel. And that's a more metaphorical way of putting it, but I love that. Sorsha, I'm gonna turn to you. I don't know if you've been able to, because I know a little bit of sound issues, so we've just been having you here, but how do you feel, if at all, does what we've been talking about in hyperdimensionality, how does that influence your magic? And do you have any rights that are maybe in that theme? Do you have anything going on with it? If not, like how does it, if it influences it all, how do you feel about it?
It definitely does, working in the dimensions has changed me fundamentally as a person and as a magician. I'm hearing some reverberation.
It's all right. We'll get it sorted soon.
Okay, there we go. That's better. I would say that, a lot of my rights could, delve into it. I mean, I always see myself as tapped into these other places on some level because of the work that I've done, specifically in the abyss. There's always part of me there, and there's always part of the abyss here in my space within me. It's like a current that just continually flows in my life and experience, and I use that.
Yeah, and in like the rights that you have, like the abyss is like. Go ahead. I was saying in the abyss, that's so coherent with what the idea of the spaces in between are. Like it seems like that's a very potential, not to take one gnosis and somehow try to shoehorn it into another, but it seems like there's some relevance, like there's definitely some similarity. And I do apologize for the sound issues. I know that's causing some issues. Like when you talk, I know that like when you talk and you hear your own echo and stuff, that like always messes with me. Like I always I get like an instant headache. So I hope you're doing okay.
Yep. So what would you like to know? I mean, I work more definitely in the abyss, probably, when it comes to specific dimensions. Between the abyss and the Enochian working that I do, definitely there's many realms to delve into. I see it as places that we can explore. People may traditionally go to these places to receive gnosis, to converse with the entities there. I see them as cosmic portals, cosmic gateways. It's like a cosmic cipher puzzle that you have to unlock. And once you unlock them, these frequencies, these energies can flow into your worlds into your space and do different things, whether you are consciously directing them or not. Once you open these doors, the energy flows, and it's just a matter of either opening the nozzle or closing it. I don't know that you could ever completely close it, though. So I just kind of keep that in mind with the work that I do.
And all right, so then, yeah, I mean, because like when you're, yeah, I love that because you're talking about like, especially with the opening and closing, because like a lot of this is gate oriented too. Like when we're talking about other dimensions, we're talking about gates, which I know Waylon, that's like one of Waylon's like absolute favorite things in the universe is talking about gates. It's very related. So like when you're talking about that, it's I'd be very interested to see more of that. I know you have your own thing coming out soon. I hope that we can get into that. Like maybe we'll have you on by yourself soon to talk about that because I know that's coming soon. So we'll make sure we do that. Either mine or Waylon's or the Dark Sorcery channel, because that would be a really cool conversation too.
Well, thank you. That would be a lot of fun. I really look forward to chatting a bit more about it later.
We'd love to have you. All right, so now we'll get back to Qayin for a minute, and then I think Waylon also had a question for Sorsha too. Let's get back to Qayin. So we were talking about obviously how do we apply all of this? Like how do you apply it to your practice? Besides the obvious, maybe.
Apply specifically.
Like the idea of, I mean, in a way, maybe it's kind of a moot question, like a silly question, because we've kind of already answered it. Is like, how do you apply the idea of hyperdimensionality to your magic? It's kind of obvious, but is there any special thing you'd point out that maybe we haven't said yet? Since a lot of your magic is based on this idea already.
I think that it's beyond all of it. People looking at what is real, what is not real, dimensional beings, non-dimensional beings, earth plane beings. Everybody's, the importance of consciousness. All of this essentially just breaks down to experience. And a lot of people will question experience. Well, I had a dream and I went through this experience, but it doesn't count because it was just a dream. Or I had this encounter with these particular entities, but those aren't real entities or whatnot. So I will discount that experience. So the idea of it, and I'm paraphrasing, but he says that the difference, there's very little difference between those things that are real and those things that are not real, as long as one takes the experience from it. The experience is valid. And I think that when we're dealing with these kinds of entities, these kinds of plans, and it's so very, as this conversation has gone, it's the tendrils of it just, extend out into so many different levels of thought and science and religion. And, there's so many different facets of it. But at the end of the day, for the magician, it's to take that experience. Don't discount, don't throw anything out because of this or that. We are here to live, we're here to experience, we're here to push forth. And that's all that's important at the end of the day. There's, questions about, as an example, Carlos Castaneda, was an author that really wrote some groundbreaking work. But a lot of controversy surrounds him and if he really did these things or not. Regardless of if he did those things or not, the information that is in the books is valid. And so you can't just toss that information that's valid out because of this or that. You have to take that experience and learn from it and work that into your own path and move on. So, when you're dealing with all these different things, essentially at the end of the day, just experience, learn from it, and then keep going on.
Yeah. I know Waylon had a question for Sorsha. I just want to weigh in just for a second. I mean, I'm like Waylon. Most of what I do is already based heavily on several different layers, and hyperdimensionality is one of them. A lot of what I do is, but primarily like what you're talking about, Qayin, a little bit, is this idea of the subjective reality it contains everything. It contains the objective reality. Right. So it's kind of stupid to discount one facet in favor of another unless it doesn't serve you. So in other words, unless you really just don't vibrate with it and harmonize with it, I would use it. It doesn't matter how goofy it sounds. Like anybody who's new to this, if you're listening to Qayin, you're listening to me and Waylon and Sorsha and everybody. We're talking about the Lovecraftian entities, and you're like, that's a character in a book. And I just responded to somebody like that on Facebook. I think that's what their point was. And I responded and I told them, you know, the Goetic spirits, we don't have that much more proof that they're a traditionally valid entity either. You know, who does? Where do you get this from? It's all a story in some way. It's always based on a story.
Called.
What's that?
Yet they answer when called.
They do.
And whether it's a real spirit or not, you can even just view it as this is your subconscious, this is your psyche telling you need to go on this journey. And I would encourage anybody to never, ever, 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 ever discount something that feels magical just because some jackass, pardon my French, tells them that it wasn't in an old enough book or something stupid like that. And someone's mentioning the 21 Lessons. I think he's talking about 21 Lessons of Merlin. 21 Lessons of Merlin is one of the few books I've read on magic, and this was way back in the day. And it was a fictional grimoire, apparently, which I'm pretty sure it was now that I look at it now. But people still did the rites, and they worked, some of them. So we did the Wild Hunt when I was a kid, and it totally worked. Like, we totally had an experience. It was insane. So that doesn't mean that it was a legitimate system, but it means that we made it legitimate through our work. And I think that's kind of like what you're talking about, too. Don't discount it. You know, these are all threads. These are all tendrils of the same megaverse, I guess.
It kind of falls into the same line, you know, with egregores. You know, it exists because you've allowed it to exist. You've given it life. You've given it placement. You've given it importance. And once you've done that, then it does take a life of its own.
Yeah, so, you're the god of your reality. Period. I mean, right. It's. Waylon, you had a question for Sorsha, and then before we get to that, we're going to be ending on the soon side. So if you guys have any special questions for our guests or me or Waylon, please start typing them now, and we'll get to a few of them before we cut it out. And we're not going to say thank you yet, so we're not quite done. But let's get to Waylon's question for Sorsha, and we'll go from there, guys. Let me connect the mics here. Hold on.
All right. So at 21 Lessons of Merlin, I really like. I still own my copy of the 21 Lessons Lost Book. I've got something called the Druidic Handbook. I paid $35 for that, brand new. And I'm not gonna lie, I still have memorized to this day the 3 words of making, and I know how to use.
Of course, yeah. I love that shit. That's right from the movie. It's right from the movie. They didn't. That's not real. That's right from the movie.
Before I ever saw the movie, so I didn't know that was a fucking thing, dude. I didn't watch shit. I read shit. But anyway, so I'm so sorry about that. My question to Sorsha, because my sister here, we have had so many deep conversations. We've talked about everything from void work to Enochian, and talking about these things. Now, we've never approached this though in the form of interdimensional and all these, you know, in the degree which we're talking about it tonight. But let's say, for example, because a lot of us who do some of the things that we do, we're coming at this from a void perspective. First off, because we've already removed everything else. When you're working with Enochian entities, I was curious as to whether or not you may have done similar to something similar to what I've done, and visualize them as higher planar beings, and started from there.
Yes, I never assumed that they were angels in the Judeo-Christian sense. You know, I find that the system itself was wrapped in religious boxing. And to really appreciate the system, especially on the left-hand path, one must take it out of the box and strip it of the dogma and get down to the mechanics of the magic. It's a beautiful system, and a lot of people, I think, set it aside, particularly left-hand path people, because of the wrapping in which it was delivered. And I think that the mistake on the right-hand path side is they only scratch the surface and they don't go deep enough. So when you can just forget about sides and get down to the mechanics of magic, it's like the matrix of magic. You know, it is a quantum computer. It is a mainframe. These higher intelligences are much like the software. If you want to use a computer analogy, you know, you have the system, you have the sigillum, the amat, which is like the mainframe. it represents the entire system is represented in this one symbol. And these higher intelligences they each have a purpose. They each have things that they can do for us, instruct us, help us figure things out. But I think when we get away from the Judeo-Christian models of considering them angels, and when you get back to the D diaries in the Latin, there's only a handful of angels or intelligences that call themselves angels. The rest of them never say that they are angels. It is simply assumed so by man for to go along with the religious agenda of the time. So the entire system I consider a time capsule. It was delivered back in the day, but it was meant for today because we have the mathematics, the geometry, and the technology to actually understand what it is.
That's a good point. Like, as our technology improves, our ability to maybe not ability, maybe it's not an improvement, but our vision of the spirit world changes to match. It's kind of like the idea of the UFO. Like, once upon a time would have been a chariot of the gods. It would have been seen as a wheel in the sky with glowing angels around it. Now we see like a spaceship. And the people of the Victorian era saw UFO as a big air blimp. And what is this fucking thing, right? So it's kind of like, I mean, would you say it's kind of a similar thing too?
Yeah, very much so. And the entire system, I mean, there's codes within codes, as you delve into it, when you start playing with ciphers, when you start playing, like thinking of it as a book of codes. I mean, yes, there's a system as it's delivered. Yes, it works. Enochian magic works as is, as given, by the diaries, and by, a lot of the contemporary groups that have tinkered with it over the years. It works regardless. But when you go deeper, you see a lot more, and you see things that would only be applicable to things today.
Yeah.
And so that's why I consider it as a system of information given by higher intelligences, because this would not have applied to things in John Dee's day, a lot of it.
Good point. Yeah.
It's like it had to be wrapped in the packaging to be able to survive the centuries. And then here we are with this perfect system that when
it's
you
kind of
delve
like
into it,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
You can heal yourself, you can heal the world. Like when you start getting into the calls, when you start playing with language, you can start tinkering with physical matter. You can tinker with DNA. There have been people who have spoken these Enochian keys, like a group together, and they have cleared up lakes of algae and filth within days. So you can see tangible results to this system, this spiritual thing, this sound, this vibration. I think a lot of people there the surface and they go no deeper.
They don't go deeper.
But when you start thinking of it in terms of like quantum physics, it makes a lot more sense and it's a lot more useful.
I think a lot of times people invoke quantum physics almost like a magic spell of its own to explain whatever they don't understand. Sometimes it's almost like the reverse. Like, skeptics make fun of us for jumping to magical conclusions. That means they don't understand what we're doing, because I don't do that. I don't jump to the conclusion that magic answers everything that I experience in the same sense that I do. Like, I believe I'm doing magic all the time. I believe everything I do is magic, that this is all magic. But by the same token, I don't jump to the conclusion that just because I don't understand a thing, there isn't a scientific aspect to it. And in the reverse sense, is also true. You can't assume that there's no magic in everything just because there's a scientific explanation. I've often believed that science is a response to magic. We develop science as a response to an original magical spell of a caveman somewhere going, I want to understand how to not die from being cold. And magic provided the answers to that over time. Now, Waylon has another question for Sorsha, I believe.
For all of you.
Uh-oh.
Okay, for all of you real quick. Now, I was going back and I was reading through the thing, and it's funny that the question I was going to ask, I think Ethan Ross may have asked in a similar fashion. But my question is this right here. All right, so in my own personal understanding of how this works with the old ones, with interdimensional beings, I like to think of these things as architects that created emotional responses that exist within the seed of humanity itself. It's why children are afraid of darks, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Not necessarily the reptilian brain with the whole, eat, sleep, sex, and all that, but a lot further than that. Where did these non-conditioned responses, emotional responses, come from? I honestly think that that these older beings that it's a byproduct of their essence or their existence upon all planes, and that's how it's kind of affected us. But my question is this right here. Do you look at them as if they are archetypes? Because I personally, I don't, because I think of them as beyond that, maybe the things that may have created or constructed a concept of archetypes as in the form of help me out here, Thorne. Gregory?
Yeah, Grigori.
Yeah. Or tulpas or anything of that nature. What is your take on that, if that made any sense?
I'm still trying to figure out kind of the question. I'm
Okay.
sorry. Like,
My question is this: do you think that, starting with Sorsha, do you think that that these old ones or whatever, do you think of them more like architects that created emotional responses, so forth and so on, that are inherent in humans? That's one part of the question. Second part, do you think that they are also architects of archetypes, or what do you think concerning that? So it's a two-part question.
I'm really not sure. I think I just figure it out as I go. I think that, they can be archetypes, but I think that they are their own entities as well. I don't really have a solid opinion either way.
Well, that's fair.
It's honest.
It's very fair.
No, I mean, no, that's perfect, because you've got to, if you don't have anything really to put into something like that, at least being open-minded to accept whatever may come through later on for you. So that's perfect.
Every big leap of wisdom and knowledge and experience and science starts with the saying, "I don't know." It's a perfect answer. I mean, I don't know. And for me, like, I would say, I don't know. And what I would say I do know is this: that human beings, because of the way we are always going to see things as archetypes. Whether or not they are or not is irrelevant. We can look at the old ones, and when they interact with us, that's part of the madness, is they don't necessarily fit the archetypes that we have established in our life. The only archetype they fit is like the Plutonian weirdness that doesn't make any sense. It's so far out there we can't touch it. But at the same time, even that is unknowable. They're kind of like the void itself. The mind can't know the void as it is. It can only know the shadows of the void. And these spirits, whatever they are, is unknown. I don't know if, to call them architects is like giving them an authority that I don't think even they believe.
What I may be referring to, because I know a lot of times you and I, we stumble over words and things.
Sure.
What is your conceptual understanding of it, according to the guidelines of the question?
Yeah, I mean, I really still can't answer, but I think that we see archetypes when there are none. We archetypes is our nature. It's part of what we are.
Yeah.
And when we look at the old ones, we create archetypes. Like Qayin classifies Nyarlathotep as the heart and soul, whatever the mask of the old ones, and each one has, this one's the gate, and this one is the dreamer, and this one is that, and that's all very true and well and good. But at the same time, if you touch them, if you speak to them, and I think Kane's going to have a lot to say about this, when you do that, oh brother, it's not going to fit any English, like you said, it's not going to fit.
Yeah,
I mean, that's the thing is, there's such prominent connection or communication that occurs through dream work. It's one of the primary ways of communication, simply because it works so well with us rather than a direct communication. It's a lot easier for them to communicate that way. and a lot easier on the body, essentially on the human body, to receive that kind of communication while in that state. So a lot of amazing transmissions came through. With Lovecraft, the transmission Nyarlathotep itself, his very first contact with the Old Ones was indeed with the messenger of the Old Ones, and that validates things a whole lot more as well. Is the emissary came to him. It wasn't Cthulhu, it wasn't Azathoth, it wasn't Shub-Niggurath, it wasn't any of the others. It was the messenger himself, the ambassador, the representator. He was there to represent them and to speak for them, and so that was really amazing. But the whole initial contact was written down. He jumped out of bed, just amazed himself that this had actually occurred, that he'd actually experienced this. This was far more than a dream, clearly by how he wrote about it. And he wrote it down as fast as he could. And at the end result, only I think like three words were changed. He didn't even realize what he was writing. He was just tapped in, receiving these things, these messages, these visions. And so dream work is absolutely very prominent and a cornerstone to this kind of communication with these kinds of entities. And it's not only the Old Ones that this occurs with. Many people have prophetic dreams or have dreams that spirits, or the dead come to them and speak to them very important messages. So it's kind of a state I find that the human body or human consciousness kind of goes into, which makes a lot of this kind of contact a lot easier than in the waking mind.
Fascinating. Yeah,
I love that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't dream very much. I mean, I do dream. I just have, because of sleep apnea problems, I don't always remember them. But like the dream that I had of getting my seat at the table, that was an astral dream. There's no question. It was real, whatever it was. Living proof. Here we go. There was one other question, I think, if you guys don't mind. One came up from Lolana Sine, I think that's how you say it. Do you think the Old Ones have their own principalities and kingdoms here on Earth? And I'm just going to leave that out there. I mean, Qayin to be the expert, but I'm leaving that out here for everybody, whoever wants to answer it. And then I think we're going to wrap up at that point.
I don't personally believe so. And in my experience, no. And I know that there's, different sigils, say for Lucifer over, the East and the West. And so it's interesting that it's divided up. It's said that different, spirits and Godic kings have different authority over different lands or different countries. But in this case, this is kind of one of those things that there really is no confining this situation. They are within all things and are interwoven through all things. And so I don't really believe that there's any kind of not dictatorship, but ownership over any kind of pieces of land. I don't think that, Shub-Niggurath owns Australia, and then we got
that'd be kind of like us
that way,
That'd be kind of like us pretending we own an anthill. Like when you walk by an anthill, the ant's going, which one do you think owns us? The big one or the female or the, it's like,
right.
No, we just step on you and that's it. And it's, there is no ownership.
Right,
it's just,
and see, that's an easy way for people to try to, assimilate these beings into different kinds of ranks or way to organize them exactly into something that they can comprehend, and that's just not really the case in this situation.
Yeah,
I'm more inclined to think that if it is a matter of principalities, it's not necessarily like as Ben Qayin said, like physical places, but more like the people who resonate with them. It's almost like you are of their current, so perhaps the principalities have to do with like a spiritual principality or with the people who walk this earth.
It was always a very Lovecraftian thing for there to be cults and things, so they kind of would have had, if we're going by the fiction anyway, there would be something like that, like their representatives on Earth, like Lovecraft was a representative, Qayin's a representative, I'm a representative. Anyone who's worked with them, in that sense, yeah, I think that's a good point.
Well, I'm gonna try and keep this short. Imagine that, like when we were children, they had those little square toy things with the different shapes and the little blocks that fit it, and you were trying to fit it in. Well, imagine it's like this right here. In the occult community, everybody tries to fit everything into a system that is workable. There's nothing wrong with this. You'll find this all throughout any magical practice or system. But one thing that you know, the concept of cults and followers, that's just going to be a thing. That's going to happen with these forces and powers. And coming full circle with a thought here, you know, concerning Qayin with his Trinity of Triangles, and you know, and the way he described the psychometry of it, you know, and this might even fit down Thorne's alley with, you know, angles and, you know, shapes and things. You know, that's why I brought that up about the little toy. Is that, you know, a lot of these things, you know, they're expressed in this form of symbolism because it's the only way to actually be able to express in a visual way that we can understand of how they're accessed. Now, the actual physical workings or the mental workings of how to make that work for you, now that's a whole nother ball game. But to keep it short and simple, I personally, you know, I had to find. It's no surprise my channel is named the Black Tower because it is the Black Tower of Koth. You know, and I had to find this place for myself because you have to enter into their realm to be able to not to be able to work with them, because I mean you can work with them on this level, but it's not the same. You've got to get closer to something that has their essence and their energy in it for them to be able to formulate and be able to work more closely with. And with that being said, you know, so I use the tower. I go to the tower, work with these beings. It's a lot easier because you're in between all these spaces and angles and things, and maybe the wording there will come out archaic as hell, but I'm trying my best to explain it in the only English I'm able to do so.
Yeah, I think you explained it well. And like, in fact, at some point I want to talk to Kane about the Tower of Koth and you two and the Tower of Babel, what references things could work together, because that's always been like they seem like they might align a little bit. Someone asked a question. I think we should get into the wrap up. I mean, we gotta keep the lights on. Let's talk about the house a little bit. Someone asked if there's going to be more people joining the house, and you know, I definitely want to recommend you know go to From the Ashes, you know, publishing.com. Obviously, you're part of Dark Sorcery. If you're watching this, go to our individual YouTube channels. Kane's got a right to Nyarlathotep, however you want to say it. I like to say it with the Hotep because I always feel like the Hotep is the title. You know, when you check out the house, I mean, there's some really interesting stuff there. There's going to be a lot more growing, and I'm going to let Kane and Sorsha really fill you guys in on that since I'm the newbie. But what's coming with new people? Do we have new people on deck? What's going on?
All right. So basically, yeah, we've got a couple of people waiting in the wings right now that we're working on getting in. And so I don't want to reveal anything yet. They're very special, and I can't wait to have them. Can't wait to have them on board. So just gonna have to sit tight and see what happens. But I will say that they're very special people, and I'm very much looking forward to them being a part of the house.
That's awesome. And so in lieu of all these conversations, I would even say like, you know, my Eye of the Storm, you know, right has been more popular than the others already. And I would say that that's kind of fitting in it, because I do end up, as part of the working, I have to go deep into a state where I'm delving into that abyssal plane, that void plane, to try to reach the eye of the sleeper. It's almost kind of, you know, similar, but I would say that, you know, you definitely have the market cornered for interdimensional rights there with the right to, you know, Nyarlathotep. So we'll definitely have to, maybe we'll do a whole video about that at some point in the future. Just a short one, you know, like a little 10-minute video or something where you describe it. And is there anything else you guys want to say to our audience and our beautiful friends? And Soel Denui, I missed you, my friend. I'm glad to see you. I see you're down there. I see you. Hello. Everybody who's here, we had Behemoth X, we had a whole bunch of nice people. Ethan, of course, is always here. Mercer is a fan of Lovecraftian stuff. Some new people I don't recognize, Sally, and a whole bunch of guys. You know, anything you guys want to say to our friends in the audience before we end the stream?
When working with this current, walk softly and carry a big stick.
I got one right here.
There you go. You're already halfway there.
That's the one I used for the
I want to say thank you to everybody for showing up, for being here, and for supporting From the Ashes Publishing. You know, no surprise, the Black Tower, man, dude, I'm telling you, I am I support this group. This is my family. Despite anything whatsoever, you've got real, and then you've got what, and From the Ashes Publishing to me has always screamed real. It just has. I'm glad that we have Qayin coming out more. That we're able to do more of these videos, and I also want to thank everybody for inviting me in on this live stream. Thank you, guys.
Couldn't have it without you. You're one of the admins of Dark Sorcery. This is a Dark Sorcery stream, brother. This is the family of Dark Sorcery here, and we have
because the lines get blurred.
What's that?
I said the lines get blurred.
They do. Well, like, how many channels do we have now? We're gonna have to just make one super channel and just call it and just just something. Listen, guys, thanks for joining us. We're gonna cut out and have a little wrap up on private. Please make sure you subscribe to this channel. Subscribe to my channel, DH Thorne. Subscribe to the Black Tower. Subscribe to. Someone will have to put a link to From the Ashes YouTube channel, because they're going to be doing more there. I'm going to be doing more there. Make sure you check out the house. Make sure you check out Dark Sorcerer on Instagram. And we love having you guys. Thanks for being here. Waylon, what's the closing statement?
Until next time, peace, blessings, and power.
Peace, blessings, and power. Have a good one, guys.
Good night.